The answer is, no, thank you. Are you kidding me? I've been on a ton of podcasts and people just same questions.
Welcome to the Idea Climbing Radio Show. Today we're here with Michael Goldberg of Knockout Networking, and author of the book Knockout Networking for Financial Advisors and Other Sales Producers. And as you can see from his background, founder of the Networking Group. Thank you for being here, Michael. I appreciate making the time.
I appreciate you carving out time.
And today we're going to be talking about networking your way to your next big idea. But as far as networking, I'd like to know a little bit about behind the scenes with networking. To get started, let's first look at what's your journey been? Have you always been a natural networker? Did you discover it somewhere along the way?
Once upon a time, I brought in more sales for a consulting company, a Boston-based consulting company, than an entire sales team combined. Wow. And which I didn't realize until it kind of struck me one day on a P&L. And I realized it's time to start my own business. But as I started reflecting on how all those things happened, I didn't think I was the best salesperson, but I did realize that I was a pretty good connector. I did realize that I was really good at speaking with people. I was genuinely interested in them. And I realized that if you hang out with really cool people that are doing cool things and you help them with those cool things, they will help you right back. And that's a cool thing. And that is networking. And once I realized that that formula worked, and it wasn't manipulative, I think I was natural. Like I was so naive, had such naivete that I just didn't realize that that's just, to me, it was just fun connecting with people, helping, and they just reciprocated. And it just turned into business, introductions, relationships. It reached to the bottom line, and it created a path that I'm still bumping around and figuring out, right? On this whole networking, teaching people how to network journey.
Well, looking back, you were successful at it at an early age. What do you think, in retrospect, what were you doing differently than most networking people?
I think I was being very intentional at the time. Not that others weren't. I didn't even really know what networking was. Like, I wasn't part of groups or anything like that. I was just really good at just connecting and cultivating relationships and going to places where those things happen. So I wasn't really going to networking groups, at least not at that time. I was active in an association or two, but again, I wasn't really familiar with, we have to network now. It just, I was in this place with people that I could learn from and people that I think we could collaborate with. Like, it was really just as simple as that. And it just took to that because I was the only person, and I wasn't even part of the sales team. Like I was a consultant. I was a guy that was delivering speaking and training programs. It was an independent sales team. I wasn't even part of that. So they weren't doing the things that I was doing. And I didn't do it to bring in sales. I went there just because I thought I should.
Yeah.
So salespeople weren't doing that. They were cold calling. And this is back in, you were talking like 1996, 1998, when I was figuring all this stuff out. So they were banging the phones and cold calling. And to me, it was just, listen, I'm a speaker, trainer, coach. I'm doing all these different things. And it wasn't my banner. I was working for a consulting firm at the time, but it was really just getting out there, getting the message out there. Like I really didn't know, not that I didn't know what I was doing, but I didn't have a formalized approach at the time. That came later.
Well, you said getting the message out there. What was the message at the time that you were getting out?
I wanted people to know who I was, what I did, and I wanted to be a force within the groups that I was hanging out in, but I wanted to do that for them too. So I wanted to just kind of hang out with great people, thinking that, as they're talking about great things, as they're connecting with one another, this is a place that I need to be. And one of those places, I'm just thinking of it now, is, the magazine Fast Company.
Oh, yeah.
Well, at the time, that was like a thing, not that it's not a thing now, but it was like a new buzz back then. And they had this group called, I think they called it a cell. And it might still be in place now. Like I really am. I'm just thinking of this now. And I think it was called Circle of Friends, COF. And there might even be a column in that magazine now. And I remember somebody telling me this Fast Company thing is like a buzz. They had this whole Circle of Friends thing. And at the time, I was based in Boston, living in a burb outside of there. And I started hanging out in this Circle of Friends group that met somewhere in Cambridge. It was very techie, I thought, at the time, because Fast Company has this kind of tech feel to it, this entrepreneurial spirit. And that's really what I got when I went to these groups. There were people that were into Tony Robbins, and I was just around really cool, uppity people. And it really was just as simple as I want to be around some of these cool uppity people, and maybe some of that'll rub off on me. And those are the places that I hung out in. It wasn't about target marketing or anything like that. It was just, hanging out where shakers, movers were hanging out. There's a lot that I could learn. I want to be part of this.
Well, to be part of a group and be part of a group successfully, or even if it's a one-off event, you have to develop some kind of brand. What was your brand when you were getting started under someone else's roof?
Well, that doesn't even exist anymore. So the company is like defunct, and then they rebranded, and a whole bunch of things happened. I'm not even in touch. I mean, it's like a lifetime ago. Like, I've been in business, for 24 years now. So the brand is kind of not relevant now.
No, your brand.
My
personally.
brand.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I launched my own business in June of 2000, and that brand was Building Blocks Consulting. That was the name of the company. And it wasn't really about teaching networking skills. It was about leadership and communication. And it was really about getting back to basics and understanding the building blocks of leadership. That's really where the whole thing started. And it felt meaningful. I was working with tech companies. I didn't really have a niche market at the time. I was still figuring all that stuff out. And then an interesting thing happened back in that day. Is I realized in 2002, I'm old, Mark, in 2002, that in 2003, the Federal Trade Commission was going to come in and roll out the do not call list, the DNC.
Oh.
And I thought that was going to be a big deal, because those that relied on cold calling were going to probably not be able to do that in the same way anymore. I also realized that I was gravitating towards the financial services industry because I was around people that were as motivated as I was, that in order to make money, you got to work it. And for financial advisors and brokers, it was really all about networking. And I figured that out. And I thought, here's a marketplace that has the resources to pay me. Here's the marketplace that does and will always need the type of services I'm envisioning that I could provide in terms of business development and networking. And my heart was taking me into that place. And I just thought, with the FTC rolling out the DNC ASAP, I thought that, this was something that I needed to look at. I created a whole PR campaign around, DNC, cold calling, and how the landscape is changing. If networking was important now, it's going to be really important come October of 2003. And my business exploded. It started off with Prudential doing a sample program with my networking ideas. And then they just started referring me around to different agencies. And that's really how it started. I started targeting the top agencies in the Prudential platform, the MetLife platform, the AXA platform. And that's when things really just started to take, because, in AXA, well, more specifically in MetLife, the smaller agencies said, well, if the big time agencies are bringing this guy in, we should probably bring him in too. And of course, I loaded that message up too at a time where, networking training wasn't really a thing. And I want to believe I lent a hand in making it a thing.
So let's start at the beginning. For those first time meetings, let's start with what not to do. What should people not do in a first time networking meeting when you're meeting one-on-one?
What not to do. You don't want to make it all about you, and you don't want to be all about selling your thing. As soon as that happens, it's over, because nobody is there to really buy your thing. So I would say that's rule number one, is don't make it all about you, and don't be focused on selling your thing. So as an example, the networking group, the banner behind me. So that's an organization that I founded in 2014. These days, it is a national, soon to be a global networking group. It's vetted. It's really a subdivision of Knockout Networking, which is really my main company, which is really all about speaking and training about networking and referrals. And, in the networking group, I remember not all that long ago, there was somebody that came into one of our communities. It might have been Atlanta. And all this guy wanted to do was sell his app. That was it. And so we vetted him, because that's not allowed. Like, this is all about learning, helping, contributing, listening, being a resource. And as soon as he started doing that, he was launched. We voted him off the island. He was done. Couldn't be part of the group, because he was here just to sell. It was just all about him. And, he broke rule number one. So people aren't going to gravitate to him. It's going to make the entire organization look bad. It's not on brand, right? And so that happens if you go to that chamber meeting. That happens if you go to that networking group, that association meeting, that circle of friends meeting, and you're just there to sell it. People are not there to buy it, and they're not going to buy you.
So what is the right way to go about networking?
I don't know. No. Well, it's kind of the opposite of all that, Mark. It's kind of like, it shouldn't be about you. Like, you want to look good, you want to come across well, but I think it's really about making other people look good, feel good about meeting you and connecting with you. And then it's about creating rapport, which doesn't always happen. I think it happens probably about a third of the time if you're good. Like if you naturally are a people person. I'm not saying you have to be extroverted. I know introverted people. I just had this conversation with a client a couple of hours ago. I know introverted people that are excellent networkers. So it's not necessarily about being extroverted. It's about knowing how to talk to people, knowing how to connect with them. And the best way of doing that is really being intentional about figuring out how you can be helpful to them in some way. And then it becomes reciprocal about a third of the time, where it becomes, well, how about yourself? What brings you to this meeting? And once you start talking about what you do, who you help, and it's collaborative as a back and forth, that's the start of something, right? With the other way, you sell them that app, that's never going to happen.
Well, if that's the start of something, what does it look like as a relationship develops? Maybe that if you meet at a virtual or live event for that matter, you have good rapport, then you want to have that first time one-on-one, or technically the second meeting. What does that look like?
I think the less it feels like business and the less it feels like transaction, I think the more genuine it's going to be and the better relationship it's going to be over time. So, for example, like I think when the day comes that I'm in Chicago and you and I actually meet in the same room, we're going to be at Wrigley somewhere watching the Cubs or something. And it's really not going to be about business. I'm sure that'll come up naturally, but it's going to probably be about baseball. It's probably going to be about family, all kinds of other things. It's going to be so much fun. That doesn't always happen, and it's not always easy. But when you're in that place with people where it's just so genuine, it's really easy. You look forward to breaking bread with the person, hanging out at a ball game. I think you're on your way to relationship build.
Well, you've mentioned a few times that it can't be transactional. Where's the middle ground where it's not transactional, but at the same time, a lot of people in the room they're there to build business? How do you reconcile those two, where you're not being transactional, but you are building a business?
Yeah, well, I think you can talk about business stuff, but it's got to be in an appropriate way. It's like once the relationship reaches the level of trust, I think once that happens, then you can say, I'm focused on this. Can you help me with that? But that's going to be reciprocal. Like if I asked you for a favor, an insight, or an introduction, you'd probably provide it for me, because you know that if you asked for the same thing, I'd provide it for you. Like it'd be an easy conversation because the rapport that we have is in that place. It doesn't always happen that easily with people. Sometimes it takes work. Sometimes, the stars aren't aligned, or there's just not that chemistry, in which case it's, it may not work. So it's really focusing, and I call that the 1/3 dynamic. Like in the book, it's 1/3 dynamics. I feel if you're a good networker and you're in an appropriate place, like a business related place, and you're looking to build rapport and do this whole networking thing, that I think that you're going to create a 1/3 connection about 1/3 of the time. So an example. I consider myself pretty good at this. So if I'm in a room, and it's a little different virtually, there's a whole other context. But if I'm in a real room, let's say in Chicagoland at a chamber, and I meet 10 people, I'm probably going to hit it off with 3 or 4 out of the 10, about a third. The other 6 or 7 or so, I'm not going to say that they're going to be hating on me or that we're just hating on one another, but it's just going to be nice to meet you. I look forward to seeing you again. And there's plenty of that, right? Where it's just your acquaintances. It doesn't really get past the whole acquaintance zone, which is fine because you're not going to hit it off with everybody. But if you can hit it off with about 1/3, which in my experience of looking at this, researching this, experience this for over 24 years, that's about right. And that's if you're good. So imagine if you're not.
What are some ways you can build trust? Because that's so important. The know, like, trust cycle. How do you build trust intentionally?
Yeah. And let me just circle back for a second. When it comes to 1/3 dynamic, usually it's time and place. So if you're at a chamber event, it's appropriate to network and speak to people. If you're on the blue line in Chicago, at about 1:15 in the morning, maybe
That's not
not.
networking.
Yeah, maybe not, right? But having said that, I have built rapport with people on a New York City subway, not looking to network business, but just smiling at somebody. And I mean like an appropriate, like there's a mom there with a child, like in a stroller or something, and kind of smiling and just showing that you're just a nice person and that you're a family person and you can relate to that. And hi, how are you? I remember those days. And so just a nice little rapport. And then it's kind of over once you get to your stop, but you've built a connection, right? It's probably not going to go anywhere, but there are stories where things like that do go someplace. Like, how do we meet, people, how do you get the girl, so those things happen socially as well, given time and place. But that's something I've done. I've been, in on subways. I've been in places where, you're not normally expected to connect with people, but I'm a natural connector. And if there's somebody with a smile or somebody there's something happening where it's kind of friendly fire, to me, it's really just about having fun in the moment. If there's some person in their headphones in their own world, maybe not. If it's, 1 in the morning, I'm at a place that I really don't want to be, maybe not. So it's situational. But the reality is, if you have that superpower of being able to connect with people, that if you choose to use that, you can connect with people almost anywhere.
Well, that's rapport. As the relationship develops, let's get back to trust, because that's much deeper than exchanging a smile or getting along for a 2-minute conversation.
Yeah.
Talk about trust.
Yeah. Well, trust is, and it depends. It kind of depends on, I think, the rapport, the feeling, how you got connected in the first place, line of work. So like in a networking group, let's just say, if you have a new member that comes into a group or comes into a chamber, let's just say they're a florist.
Mm-hmm.
You probably have no problem when you first meet them, if they say they're a florist and Valentine's Day is around the corner, saying, I'd like to order a couple of dozen roses. Like, you probably have no problem with that, right? So you're at a level of trust where there's not a lot of risk. But if they're a financial advisor and you meet them for the first or second time, are you going to give them all your dough and have them manage it? Maybe not. You're right. So not then. So that might take some time to establish a level of trust. So I think there's a lot of it depends around what that looks like. And, often time will lend itself depending on the risk factor. So it's trust and risk. And I think that's how it works. I know in organizations like BNI, Business Networking International, they've actually done a study that financial advisors, that's my target market, it takes between 8 and I think 13 months for a financial advisor to actually get a bona fide referral on average in a BNI chapter, because it takes that kind of time for the fellow members to establish enough trust and comfort in referring that advisor to other people.
For the rest of the world, is there a time factor in trust? Is it a number of meetings? What does it look like as far as
it depends? It's very subjective, Mark. It really is. It's not like on the third meeting. It's not like, second date, third date. Some people hit it off on the first blind date. You never can tell. So it really has to do with chemistry. It really has to do with the situation. It's probably a timing thing. There is no absolute formula. But I think the formula is that there has to be chemistry. And it's funny. I teach a class at Rutgers University. I'm an adjunct professor there. I had my last class last night. So I just teach Monday nights, and usually the rest of my week is actually, real work. And we were talking about interviewing. So it's a public speaking class, but I incorporate networking. Got to teach the students that because they need to know how to land jobs and internships. Oh, yeah. I also talk about, interviewing, and I've got a little bit of that background. And there's a model that I talk about in the interviewing world that I call the seas of love. And I probably got the concept someplace else, but I framed it as the seas of love. And it's not SEAS like the seas, the crashing waves, but like the letter C, apostrophe S. And there's 4 C's of love that I teach when it comes to interviewing. And this is a long-winded way to get to your answer, Mark, this is good. Right? So there's chemistry. Like, so in an interview, when you're being interviewed, there's got to be chemistry, right? So the interviewer is deciding whether they like you or not. If they don't like you, it's over, right? Agreed? Mm-hmm. Right? They don't like you, it's over. So there's got to be chemistry. Once it's kind of beyond or through the chemistry thing, which may or may not happen in that one meeting initially, again, it depends, then it's about competence. It's about, okay, so do I like you? Can you do the job? Like, do I think you're capable of doing the job? So it's chemistry, competence. Then there's compatibility. Can you do the job here. This is Fortune 500, baby. This is the big leagues. This is Wrigley. Can you play second base here in front of a Chicago-based crowd, right? So compatibility, and then compensation. Can you do the job for this? And I talk about how the interviewee goes through the same seas of love. Do I like the interviewer and the culture here? Can I do the job? Can I do the job here? Can I do the job for this? It's the same thing when it comes to relationships, when you're networking, when you're meeting people, when you're trying to establish trust, is that it really depends on the chemistry and if in fact there is. Right? And then after that, it becomes about competence. Right? So, all right, you're good. Compatibility, are you good enough for the people that I know? And compensation, am I prepared to introduce you and refer you? And that looks different, I think, depending on who the situation, depending on who the person is and perhaps what they do. Is it a florist? No disrespect, but is it a florist, or is it a profession that doesn't require a big risk? Or is it a financial advisor, somebody that, because of the nature of their work, does require a bit of a bigger risk?
With chemistry, is it just it's there or it's not, or is there a way to enhance the initial interaction as far as charisma?
I think initially it's either there or it's not. I think there are situations that you can win somebody over, or that it just takes more time to establish if in fact there's going to be chemistry or not. Like there's some people you meet, like you have me at hello, right? You just meet, you just hit it off, right? And you can talk to this person forever. And then there's other people where, it might just take some time, as you get to know them. And there's other people, it just won't happen. Like there are people that I go to meetings and I see, every quarter that I see all the time. And I don't think it's ever going to happen. I don't have great chemistry with them. Like, how do you not have great chemistry with me? But there's lots of, it's just the way it is, So it's not like it's bad. We still shake hands and kiss babies and talk, but it's on a very surfacey level. It's on a very acquaintance-based level. Like I would never necessarily reach out to them and ask for a favor because I don't feel like I have that level of trust yet.
Mm-hmm. So as far as after you have rapport, you have some chemistry, second, third meeting, it gets into a relationship, not just an interaction. What are some foundations of relationships or tips for building relationships? Because if you get along and have rapport, you want to keep that going because that's what's going to lead to business too. What are some relationship tips that you have?
You got to contribute to the relationship. Some people say, I don't love the phrase. It sounds very transactional to me, but like making a deposit into the relationship, so you do have to contribute, to it. So an example is like when you're courting a prospect, like I'll call a true prospect as opposed to a probable prospect. A true prospect is somebody that they're interested in hiring you and doing business with you because they said it, but it hasn't happened yet. Like the timing, hasn't really, been good yet. So they're a legitimate prospect. So you want to contribute to that relationship. And one of the best ways of doing that is being of service and of value to them. So providing a valuable introduction that you think would be beneficial to them, inviting them to an event. That's a great way of doing it. I'm going to this event. And I thought of you. I thought this would really be beneficial, helpful to you. So it's really contributing to their well-being and their business and their social interactions. And that's how you start to develop that rapport. Of course, the best way is to just give a bona fide referral if you have that level of trust with them.
And you have such a tight niche, and people say there's riches and niches. Why should people niche down?
It's not the only way to market and to ultimately network. It's just, in my view, the easiest. Because if you have a niche, which in my mind is a niche is a target market, right? Which to me is whom you serve best and therefore wish to serve most. And I like to break it down into industry, profession, market segment, niche, dynamic, demographic, geography, perhaps company name, perhaps I just lost my train of what's the avatar. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
I always forget that word. Like the perfect. So I see how I kind of reduced the fraction. I went from general to specific, industry, profession, all the way whittling it down to avatar. I think if you have that defined, then from a networking standpoint, it's easier to determine where you need to go, what you need to say, with whom you need to say it. Right? Makes sense? So I get a lot of financial services business because I know where to go to establish the relationships and ultimately make the connections that I need to that are relevant to my target market. So it becomes the places that I go, both online and off, the things that I say in terms of questions that I ask, how I position myself, how I'm listening and processing and communicating, and then with whom, like the people that I need to ultimately meet and collaborate with to be able to move these relationships forward. Without a target market, that becomes a bit ambiguous. That becomes X equals Y plus Z versus this is where I need to go. This is what I need to say and with whom. So you're just making it more difficult. That's all.
Well, I think this ties into going back to meeting people, and especially if you're going niche, whatever it might be. Elevator pitch.
Yeah.
We're talking about networking. It's going to come up. People are probably thinking it. Talk as far as what not to do and what to do. Value proposition, elevator pitch, 30-second commercial, whatever it might be, because I know you have some unique approaches.
Yeah, I do. And, by the way, I rented a tux for this, Mark. I just want to right. It's a holiday party later, a virtual. So just in case anybody's wondering, I don't always dress like this, even though I am a boxer and it looks like I should be announcing the fight. But
and you didn't tell me about it. I would have rented one, but oh well.
It's. I thought maybe I read the wrong memo. I mean, who knows? Yeah, that happens. But elevator pitch, elevator speech. I talk about this a lot. I've written about it a lot, and I don't love the connotation, because the connotation is that you're pitching something or that you're practicing a speech, and it doesn't sound authentic. But I use that phrase sometimes to create context around what it is. Otherwise, people won't know. To me, it's a positioning statement.
Okay.
Right. So when people ask what you do, it's how are you going to answer that question in an effort to best position yourself for people to want to remember it, be interested, like care, and then want to know more. So that's what that's about. So I remember way back when, like 100 years ago, that when people used to ask me what I did, I would just like kitchen sink it, like right, and they'd be bored, right? And has it ever happened to you? Like people like and you like your eyes are glazing over, and you walk away knowing less than what you less than what you did, and you don't care. Like,
and you're more confused.
Yeah, you're totally confused, and you have no idea what they do. So was there a connection, chemistry? No. Right? Waste of waste of time.
Yeah.
So once I realized that I was a lot of people's waste of time, I realized it might be a good use of time to figure out how to talk to people. And I thought, well, what are the few components that I should share when people care enough to ask me? And keep it simple. And I just thought, well, the musts, like they must know your profession on some level. Yeah. They must know your knowledge. And maybe you're smart, not everything, but the things that are most prevalent, so they've got to know some aspect of your expertise, but keep it simple. They should probably know your niche, target market, right? And where you hang out, the environments that you're focused on. And they should probably know about what you're looking for and how they can ultimately help when the time comes, when you have, in fact, established that level of trust. And that turned into what I call the peace statement, PEEC, which is your profession, your expertise, your environments, PEEC, and then call to action, what it is that your ask is. So it's a big part, culture of the networking group, is that in our meetings, people do deliver intros, and a lot of them have embraced this peace model concept where they are able to talk about what they do in the form of their profession, their smarts, their expertise, where they hang out, the environments, and of course, their ask. And the more specific that ask is, the more gravity, the more power it's going to create. Because when the ask is, anyone that's looking for my services, well, that doesn't mean anything. But if you can be really specific about that financial services firm that's based on Michigan Ave, that has assets under management, maybe not that specific, but if you can put company name and even people's names there, there's always going to be that, wait a minute, right? It's kind of like when you go on LinkedIn and, other people that you may know or may want to be connected with. That's how people think. If you give them the specifics, you give them the lever in the form of your niche market and your ask, and all of a sudden it becomes a wait a minute moment.
for the ask, is it the same ask in a first time meeting as it is in future meetings, or do you not ask for business in the first meeting, but you do ask once you're a member of a group? I've seen you 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, I don't think I would ask for anything, on the first date, or on the first meeting, but I would communicate what I'm always in the market for. So I might say something like, and do you want to hear what a peace statement sounds like?
Yeah, let's do it.
Right. So not that I have it memorized per se, but I own my profession, expertise, environments, and call to action, and I can positioning statement any way that I want that's appropriate. So if you're going to ask me, all right, so what's your elevator speed? So I'd say, well, I'm a speaker, trainer, coach, author, and I box. My company is Knockout Networking, the boxing thing. All I do is help sales producers grow their business. That's just profession.
Yeah.
Expertise. My expertise is in the areas of networking, referrals, and various aspects of recruiting. Almost all of my work is in the insurance and financial services industry, which is my niche market with firms like Morgan Stanley. And when I'm at events like this, I'm always looking to meet or be introduced to those that wholesale mutual funds, or perhaps CPAs that deal with mutual funds. Those are always great connections. Any advice on how, I could learn more about making more connections like that? I'm always open to feedback. Would love your perspective. Like I said.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not asking them per se, because I think it's presumptuous to do that when I'm just meeting somebody for the first time. But I do want to let them know exactly, who I'm in the market for, who I'm thinking about, who's important to me.
Yeah.
That's got to, but then I come back and say, how about yourself? So not about me anymore.
That's key.
Right? Not about me anymore. So usually they'll say, wow, that's impressive, because they asked me for the whole thing, right? Yeah. They're being kind of like a smart ass. Oh, what's your, you're the networking guy, so I give it to them. But in real time, if it wasn't like that, Mark, if you asked me what brings me here, what do? I would just give you profession. Otherwise, it's TMI, as my daughter says, too much info, right? So I would just say, I'm a speaker, trainer, coach, author. I do some boxing, which is pretty cool. My company, of course, is Knockout Networking. My company reflects that, that brand. And I focus on helping sales producers grow their business. What brings you here? You see how that's very conversational? It's not TMI. But when the time comes, I'll pepper in expertise, environments, and call to action in no particular order. But if there's that 1/3 connection, there's chemistry, and it's a back and forth, I might go there. If there's not, I probably won't.
Well, that's good for the first time and first few interactions.
Yeah.
If someone is listening or watching and they consider themselves to be a fairly more seasoned networker, what advice do you have for the people who are a little more seasoned?
Well, it's funny. Seasoned networkers, that's a loaded term. I work with a lot of seasoned networkers that I have no idea, and even top producers in financial services that are successful, smart people that still don't know how to position themselves when they're at social gatherings, when they're at business functions. So I think it's a lot of the same. I think it's just being specific, knowing your market, and not sharing too much information. It's really the kind of the adage, less is more. Like, I don't want to talk more about myself. I want to talk less and create curiosity where it's a back and forth.
What are a few ways to create curiosity? You touched on it a little bit, but directly answering, what are some ways to create curiosity? Because if you can get people to ask about you, I would imagine that's pretty close to the Holy Grail.
Again, subjective. And, I've taken courses, like Sandler and things like that, where if you, deliver your elevator pitch, people will say, well, how do you do that? Like, people never ask you that. No. They don't care, right? You're meeting them for the first and second time. How do you, they're not there to figure that out, so I think to create curiosity is you got to show natural curiosity in some of the things that they're up to. And often it doesn't start off with work. The thing that people are most curious about for me, I find in those circles, is how did you get involved in boxing? That's the number one thing people ask. Or what made you think about creating a business to teach people how to network? Like, where did that come from? Those are the two biggies, but it's usually the boxing thing. But the boxing thing is right on brand. And that's where people, how did you get involved? Because that's something that people can, that's a common interest story. That's something that people can relate to, or at least they're interested in, and I'm the same way with other people. I'm not really curious. Like, how'd you decide to become an attorney? Like, that's not compelling. But if you're an attorney that's niche in the sports world, and you're an agent and you represent, some, I don't know, college athletes, professional athletes. I'm curious, how'd you get involved in that? Right. Right. So it's got to be something that's going to be interesting, a little bit different. But I also find that if you find that you're naturally curious, which I'm typically really curious about at least a third of the people that I meet, like, and it may not be how did you get involved in that unless it's really specific. But I might say something like, how'd you get involved in podcasting? Like, to me, that's interesting because not everybody can do that. And so to me, that's a story. So then you've got to have something that's noteworthy, that's story worthy. In the networking group, and I think her, Lynn Chavarro.
Right? I think so.
Yeah, so Lynn Chavarro is a financial advisor. She's a good friend. Her firm is about to become a client firm, actually. She's the longest standing TNG, the networking group member. And what's fascinating to me about her is not the fact that she's a financial advisor or the fact that she works for a big firm or the fact that she's part of my group, but the fact that she is a former coach for the women's basketball team at West Point. And that even today in her late 60s, she plays herself. She plays in a team herself and a competitive basketball team for 60 and over women. And they win championships, like they win national championships.
Oh my gosh.
I think that's fascinating. That not only does she still do this, but she's a West Point coach and she's niched in the sports world with her practice. That is fascinating. So because of that, I'm always fascinated by her stories because she's got a story to tell. Like, how did you transition from coaching on that level to becoming a financial advisor? That's an interesting story.
Well, tell me if I'm on point here. It sounds like one thing that you're saying, you said it indirectly, but should people give 2 reasons to know you? Should you intentionally include, and I'm a boxer, and I'm in this basketball league? Or does that come up and does that just happen once in a while? Or is that an intentional thing that you do?
I think it starts with the questions that you ask, and I think in terms of being curious, it's not just asking about business, but it's about asking about all kinds of other things without crossing a line. It's about, when, outside of work, how do you spend your time? What are some things that you're up to that you find most interesting or that you think that others would find most interesting? Did you try something new this year that you've never done before? We're getting into the new year now. So are there things that you're looking to do that you've never done, for 2024? I love asking people, when's the last time you did something for the first time?
I like that.
You know what I mean? So it gets back to the questions that you ask to be able to peel away, the onion. If I'm meeting with an attorney, if I'm meeting just in networking, if I'm meeting with people, I just don't ask them a lot about their work, just surface. But after that, I start asking them other questions about their life and about their interests and about, and that's when you stumble upon the story. That's pretty cool. Sometimes I'll share, Mark, something that's going on in my life that I think is relevant and that I think is relatable. So like I've got my 16-year-old daughter about to turn 17. She's learning how to drive. She's gonna have a car, her birthday, I guess, in the next month or so, but she wants to buy it. She's like, I don't want you to, she's like, this is great. I know, love you. I know that you want to do this for me. She's like, but I've been working. I want to do this myself. That's a story I would share with somebody. It's like, can I just share something real quick with you? I've got a 16-year-old soon to be 17, blah, blah, blah. Isn't that great? And right. So people are going to probably be able to relate to that have kids. And even if they don't, that's really, and now you start to talk about the entrepreneurial spirit. You start to talk about all these other things. There's a story there. See, that's interesting. So you've got to create that interest if you're speaking to somebody that is not naturally able to do that. And most people aren't.
So you're saying you should have stories ready to go?
Not so much that you're preparing stories, but I think what you should have, at least what I would recommend having, is have what's going on in your life ready to go. Everybody's got transition going on. And again, I'm not saying, to blah, here's where the bodies are buried or TMI, but people, I think that's interesting. I think if you can keep it on the level of a common interest story, whereas so what I just shared about my daughter, that's not a huge reveal. right? That's not right. But it's something interesting that I think people can, it's human, that people can relate to. So I'll often, the things that are going on in my life, if they're not too personal, I'll share it. Just got back from a trip, taking a personal trip for the first time in 3 years. Here's where I'm going. Oh, that's interesting. Where you? Yeah, but it just creates a common interest story. Then I come back as have you been there? What's the last trip you took? So all of a sudden it's something that's really easy to talk about and it's relatable, but doesn't it get out of the way of, oh, I have to network. I have to say this thing and the peace statement, and I have to focus on this and the ask and the transition and transaction. And is it too early? It blows all that away, because just focus on having fun and creating rapport. It isn't always there. It isn't always easy, but if you can be naturally curious and ask great questions and take it off the board for a little bit, it's going to go great places. I've been to networking events where we did nothing but talk about boxing movies, Rocky Balboa, like just offline with your producer. I was talking about Rocky Day. Couldn't that be a whole conversation? Right. And that's easy. So and it's not like it should be all about you and your story. It's about sharing it, not taking over the stage and turning it back to the other person so you can allow them to share their story, because we all have them, but we have to unlock the permission to be able to express them. That's the connection.
That's awesome. And we've covered a lot of ground in a fairly short period of time. For people watching and listening that want to do networking the right way, if you were to say, do this one thing above all, at least do this, what would you tell them to do, if nothing else?
I would say have great questions to ask. I would say prepare yourself with great questions. There are lots of people, I would say the majority of people, that don't know how to go into a room of strangers and introduce themselves to somebody. Walk up to a total stranger. I mean, in a networking or a business environment. I don't mean on the blue line, right? So different deal. And it's not that they don't know how to do it. It's just that they're reluctant to do it because they don't know what to say next. But if you have questions prepared, and maybe it starts off on an index card, not that you're reading the index card, but keep it in your pocket just for safekeeping. But it's having some basic questions to ask and just taking it from there. And so here are some of mine. I mean, I just know them off the top of my head because I use them only. And I'm not saying that these are the end all be all, but they are from me. And so when I meet somebody for the first time, and usually I'm the one that's introducing myself, but I've had people, come over to me too, which is great, and very nice to meet you. I'll first start off by, have you been to this event before? Or, are you a first timer? So I want to, gain context right there. Well, I'm a first timer. Oh, great. Well, I'm a first timer as well. How'd you learn of the meeting? So now they'll talk about the person that connected them, or they found it online, or whatever it is, and I'll say, that's really great. Before we continue, can I share a quick story?
Okay.
And now, right, it's who's going to say no, don't. And now I'm going to bring something really human into it. If it's something that's happening right now, it's not something I'm preparing. I might share it because I'm excited. I'm excited that my daughter is having this conversation. She wants to do it. And she's learning to drive and all these different things, right? That's cool. Or if something happened in my life that I want to celebrate, or even a challenge that I'm dealing with. Again, I'm not going to, say something too personal, but I'll say, I'm struggling with da. Do you have any experience with that? And again, it's not a deep thing. I'm not going to share I'm a chronic bedwetter, but which I'm not. But it just might be I'm struggling with something that I want to consider making a decision about for the new year, and I would just love to know your take on that. Have you had any experience? Can you relate to that? Right? And now I'm making it about that. Now all of a sudden it's just an easier conversation because it is a collaboration. It truly is a back and forth on something that's relevant and fun. So what type of business are you in? Why is this event important to you? Do you have a target market? If so, why? If not, why not? What needs to happen in an event like this for it to be valuable for you? What are you looking to learn? What are you looking to develop? What are some of your goals? When you're not in meetings like this or talking to, yokels like me, what do you do for fun? So and that's kind of where I keep it very, very light. Now, the only time that I don't is if there's something specific that I'm looking for in terms of learning. So if I'm looking to, do work with a hedge fund, I'll say, you know, I know that you're LinkedIn Financial Services. Can I ask you a question that's a bit more industry focused? And then I might ask some proprietary questions. I'm looking to get some of these questions inside around this. And this is one of the reasons why I came to the event. So now it gives me the permission to be able to, you know, ask some questions, and because people love to give answers if you ask them the question. Right. So now if there's a reason to stay in touch, it's collaborative, there's chemistry, there's something to talk about. I'll say, listen, I don't want to take up all your time, Mark, but would you be open to exchanging cards or QR codes or whatever the kids are doing these days? And I would love to continue our dialogue if you're up for it. And if I feel the vibe, they're going to feel the vibe. Absolutely. Now they respect that I'm respecting their time. We exchange the code, the thing, whatever it is. And is there something that I can do to be helpful to you before, you know, I let you go? And it could be, well, I saw you talking to that guy over there. I know he's a CPA. Would you be open to introducing me? Of course. You know, or it's just, you know, I'll see you again. Good luck. And I promise to reconnect. Yeah. And that's on me, right? So look at me, I'm networking. So it's like, right? It's just like you're sparring in the ring. You're working on your moves, you know, but it's light.
This has been great. Thank you so much. If people want to find you online, where's the best place to go?
You know, knockoutnetworking.com would be the place. If you're interested in the networking group, it is a vetted group. But if you're interested in learning more, it is the networkinggroup.org, or just press the buttons on LinkedIn, Knockout Networking, and you will find me.
Thank you again for your time, Michael. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you, man. Keep the left up, my friend.
And